It's mid-May and I'm headed out on doing some trail work out on the section of Long Trail that I took over adoption duties for last year. Headed out at this time of year before the hiking season opens to make sure the trail is clear of branches and debris, just kind of blowdowns over the winter, as well as identify any major problems with my axe there to clear, well, up to what I call medium-sized blowdowns. If I find any large ones, I'll have to return with a saw. Most hiking trails in Vermont are closed until Memorial Day weekend. This is to let the ground dry out and not have muddy trails. Muddy trails aren't good, and as trail maintainers, we do try our best to prevent it, but it's not possible to prevent it all in a long-distance hiking trail like the Long Trail, which runs the whole length of the state of Vermont. Because if you have a muddy spot, there's a lot of people trying to avoid the mud, like this one here. They try to go kind of far, like to the side, and that means the trail gets wider, which is not what you want. You want to keep the trail as a nice little narrow path rather than widening. Like here's another example where the main trail goes down this way, but people trying to avoid that mud have walked over on this side. And it's just, you want to keep the trail as narrow as just kind of a single footpath because that is less impactful to the environment. And the reason people go around is they don't want to walk through the mud. So therefore trails are closed until kind of after general mud season is done. And if it's a wet summer, just there's a section of trails which are just going to be muddy whenever. And so I was saying, we try to do our best to limit those, but it's not like Vermont's a pretty wet place and we can't prevent that all. A secondary goal of today's hike is clearing out some drainage ditches that cross this trail. Because there's going to be, particularly given there's a major flooding event over the winter time, there's going to be some sediment that gets into them over the winter and spring and kind of clogs them up a little bit so they don't work to get water off the trail. And they're critical to preventing both the trail from washing out and preventing muddy spots. So just brought along a little hand hoe to clean out the drainage ditches. This isn't like, I'm not going to do any real like major work on them, just kind of cleaning out existing drainage ditches. If I want to do major work, I'll come with more substantial tools on a different trip that I'm coming explicitly for that purpose. This is an example of where just a little bit of work can save a lot of trouble. This drainage bar has a really nice, like, long rock set deep in that acts to kind of prevent it, like acts as like it's a rock bar to kind of anchor it, but those aren't, like, the rock bars are certainly really good. They aren't like totally, they still need maintenance to clear out the dirt and leaves that build up behind them, because if you don't clear out the dirt and leaves, the water that's running down the trail is just going to, like once this gets up high enough, it's just going to go over it and then continue running down the trail. And once it builds up enough velocity, it'll start washing out the trail. Or just like, and this is a little bit longer, but like 30 seconds of work, maybe every couple years. I don't know exactly. It depends on the location, whether it's needed all the time or only occasionally, can like really preserve the usefulness of what took a lot of effort to put in. And yeah, you can certainly bring this back even if it starts overflowing, but like that's why regular maintenance is so important on these hiking trails, in addition to clearing the blowdowns. Pulled out my saw to take down a couple low-hanging branches here that, at least given that I'm 6'3", I hit up against. These are, I don't know, not terrible, but it's good to do the brushing as well, particularly with ticks being more prevalent in this area. I like to make it so people don't have to touch any brush to potentially get ticks onto them. It started to rain. As you might see, it's wet, and I took out my backpack cover, but I didn't actually put on my raincoat, which I have with me, because kind of one of my things I've experienced is basically if I'm doing like reasonably strenuous hiking or like trail work and it's not like cold outside, it's reasonably warm, I'm going to get just as wet with a raincoat on due to sweat compared to it raining, and it's less comfortable. So I often won't put that on if I'm hiking and that sort of stuff. But I also, see right up here, came to the end of the trail and didn't end up needing to use my axe at all on this. There weren't any blowdowns I needed to clear, but it did look like a couple fell down during the winter. It just looks like someone else had been through here with a saw before I got back here, or before I got here maybe a month ago or so ago, based on the cuts. And then like cut them up, which was actually really good because several of them were larger than I reasonably could do with my axe. I just would like to know so I can not have to duplicate effort and bring my axe along. I could bring something else along and focus more on that. I stopped at the shelter back there to eat my dinner, and I didn't film there because there were some other people, hikers, coming through, and they were staying there for a bit to get out of the rain. It's drizzling right now, but not bad. Kind of, yeah, trails are closed, but and yeah, they shouldn't be on it, but I'm not that concerned about it because, as I was saying, this is a trail that, I don't think is that bad at this time of year. The idea for closing the trails is for mud season, between when the snow melts and when the ground can dry out. And we're not at that high of elevation here, but up higher it takes a lot longer for the snow to melt, and thus it takes later in the season for the ground to dry out than lower elevation here. I don't know our exact elevation, but it's not too high. I was eating dinner because I'm doing this after work. I left work a little bit early this Friday and came out to do this trail work just because it's useful. And oh yeah, one of the cool things about film or out hiking in the rain is I get to see little amphibians that come out when it gets really wet, like this red eft. I've seen quite a number of those after it started raining, and none before it started raining. Not that it was particularly dry. It rained 2 days ago. But back to what I was saying about after work. So I come here after work. It kind of makes sense for me in order such that I can come here. It's not on my way home, but it's about equal from here to home as from here to work and from work to home. So there's some advantage to it, and it's just a nice thing to do after work on a Friday. Start your weekend out with this. And I actually once, right when I started this a year and a half ago, was told that there was a tree down on the trail. This was in December, and actually came out in the dark before work, and it wasn't that far from the road, and cut it up to clear it, because these trails are used in the wintertime. As you noticed when I was clearing those branches, I stopped, took off my pack because I had to get my saw out, as opposed to when I've been doing the with my little hoe, which I carry with me. And that's kind of my philosophy of what I call light trail work, which is having one tool in hand so you can just kind of do a little bit of work and move on without having to like take off your pack every time you need to do work and get the correct tool out. Certainly if I think if the work requires that, like I have my axe, which is like that, but when I'm just moving, like here, there's a little drainage ditch that somebody else had previously knocked in, but I can clean out. I can just like do that and then keep moving along without having to like stop and pull this tool out of my backpack. Despite this being light trail work, as I classify it, I'm still wearing my full work pants and work boots, and well, that's largely because I brought an axe along. I've managed to save myself probably a not insubstantial injury because I was wearing work boots and work pants one time when my axe went through a rotten log unexpectedly. So if I'm using my axe, I want to be using these full work pants, whereas just like this hoe or other kind of dirt work tools, in order to make the walking easier, I might choose to not wear full work pants and work boots. As I approach the road, I think about one of the other things of my light trail work. Today I use this little hand hoe. It doesn't have a formal name, it's just a tool we kind of put together, found a blade and put together in both directions. Kind of when I do light trail work, I often don't do that. I'll like use one tool on the outbound and then put it in my pack, and then use one tool on the way back to kind of do different types of work. And yeah, I could have done that today with like using this on the outbound and then my saw on the inbound to do some kind of brushing work to make the trail kind of more available. I did a little bit of that brushing work at the end, and well, in addition to the tick problem or that I was trying to solve with it, it also just means that the wetness doesn't get on you as you hike by, which is probably more of something that people who are actually hiking think about. But today I didn't do that because on the outbound way, I didn't want to spend all my time and energy dealing with all the drainage bars if then I come across a big tree I need to deal with, or multiple trees I need to deal with my axe, which I could well have. There were trees down that the other person dealt with. But I wanted to save the energy, but whereas on the way back, I was able to kind of clean out all the ones that weren't as important. Yeah, I cleaned out the really important ones on the outbound way, whereas on the way back, I was able to deal with almost every one of them. And that just is something that why I chose to do that today rather than using the saw. And most of this area doesn't need brushing. It was well taken care of in kind of all aspects by the time I got it. This section took it over from the previous adopter, and so it doesn't need a lot of work, just kind of keeping up the maintenance. Or all trail sections in Vermont probably could use a decent amount of maintenance, but this is one of the better ones. And I plan to kind of film all of my trail work trips that I go on this year, and just kind of show you what a season of my trail adopting is like.